behalf of the General Assembly,
I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Mikheil Saakashvili, President of Georgia, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is always a great honor for me to address the annual gathering of the Assembly of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, in an uncertain time like ours, cooperation is more necessary than ever. Unless we stand together and invent new approaches to the global challenges we are all facing, we will be torn apart by the self-destructive interests. Gatherings like this one, therefore, are valuable only if they allow us to shape a common vision for concrete actions towards peace, development, solidarity, and justice. This month, thanks to the coordinated efforts of the international community and the leadership of the President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton, direct peace talks have resumed between Israelis and Palestinians. This is a very important moment because they resumed precisely when many people had given up hope for just and lasting peace in the Middle East. The road to peace, security and justice is still a long one. The remaining obstacles are enormous, but the goal is so noble and necessary that no effort should be spared. This is why today I would like to pay tribute to all those who are taking risks for peace. Yes, risks, because peace is never obvious, never easy. That is certainly true in the Middle East, and it is true in my region as well. One of our common goals then must be to enable those risk-takers who have the courage to defy conventional wisdom and forge new paths to peace. Peace is not the only easy way, but peace is the only way. As the president of a young democracy that recently suffered from war and invasion and is still under partial occupation of important parts of its territory by a nuclear superpower, I can say this: peace is our most precious common goal and at the same time our only path towards the other goals we share. To those here and in my own country who see no way to reverse the armed occupation or reduce regional tensions, I say, peace is not the goal, it's also the means to any goal. Today, ladies and gentlemen, my region is at crossroads. For too long, it has suffered from division, injustice, conflict, colonization, and violence. Today, however, change is possible. In fact, change is already taking place. I came here to speak about this change and to promote a specific vision, a vision for free, stable, and united Caucasus. From Pushkin to Lermontov, or Tolstoy till now, the Caucasian mountains were a symbol of wilderness and paradoxes, a region where individuals and souls were fundamentally free, but where citizens were politically oppressed, where people and cultures were deeply tolerant, but where governments and authorities created artificial divisions, where shepherds would cross 5,000 meters high mountains, but where rulers erected walls nobody could cross. I came here today to tell you that these times are vanishing, that the dream of unity and peace is possible. When I addressed you 2 years ago, in the aftermath of a full-scale invasion, and when Russian foreign minister was openly discussing with foreign diplomats and the international community the possibility of total annihilation of Georgia, few people believed that our country would survive as an independent and democratic state. Few people thought that our government would endure, that our economy would survive the war and the global crisis, that our reforms could continue with renewed vigor, or that it would make steady progress toward the European Union and the Euro-Atlantic structures. Well, I am proud to tell you, 2 years later, that we have succeeded against all the odds. Thanks to the commitment of the Georgian people and to the support of friends and allies. Today, Georgia is back. Georgia is back first as a laboratory for political reform and social transformation. More than ever, we are committed to the promise at the heart of the Rose Revolution to turn a failed state into a modern European one. Our local elections last May were proof of the transformation milestone for our democracy, the result of 7 years of patient, constant, tireless reform. Our objective is clear: to create a more institutionalized system of liberal democratic governance. Ladies and gentlemen, my term as President ends in 2013, and these changes will survive my presidency and the current government. Because we are not only speaking about changes of leadership or reforms of institutions, we are speaking about something deeper and stronger, which recently the Economist of London has branded as Georgia's mental revolution. The Georgian people have tested freedom, the absence of corruption, the fruits of economic development, the emergence of a true meritocracy. They have changed their behavior, their vision of the world, their dreams even, and they will mightily resist any attempt to reverse these changes, no matter if those attempts come from inside or from abroad. This is our great victory. We help to create something that goes far beyond the leaders and parties that led the Rose Revolution. We help to create a revolution of the heart and the mind. Once one of the most corrupt countries of the post-Soviet world, Georgia has made greater gains in the fight against corruption, as witnessed by Transparency International, than any other country in the world over the past 5 years. Once a place where foreign investors were kidnapped by gangs and mafias, Georgia is now ranked by the World Bank as number 11 for the ease of doing business of the world, a ranking we hope that will further improve this year. These rankings, and the number 1 in Eastern and Central Europe, these rankings make clear why Georgia's only interest is peaceful resolution of conflicts. Georgia is winning the peace. Georgia is winning through peace. Our northern neighbor expected us to change our path when it imposed on us full embargo in 2006, invaded us in 2008, ethnically cleansed the Georgian regions and illegally occupied 20% of our territory, an occupation that continues to this day. All these actions had one objective: to destroy the Georgian laboratory of political, economic and social reforms, to prevent the region from changing. We answered these relentless attacks by reinvigorating our reforms, opening our economy even more, and accelerating our social transformation. This is our policy, and no provocation will ever make us change it. Thanks to this commitment to reform, Georgia is now a responsible international player. I am proud that my nation is fighting international terrorism in Afghanistan. I would like to pay tribute here to our nearly 1,000 soldiers who are risking their lives every day in the south of Afghanistan to help the Afghan people to secure a stable, terror-free future. I want to pay a special tribute today to Company Commander First Lieutenant Mikheil, who died earlier this month. Mikheil was killed in the cause of peace while serving alongside NATO forces in the dangerous Helmand province of Afghanistan. We are fighting other common scourges, now focusing especially on terrible danger of nuclear trafficking. Many times over the past 7 years, we have intercepted criminals who had in their possession the essential ingredients for nuclear devices. Every step of the way, we have cooperated with our allies in the international community to ensure that Georgia is doing everything possible to confront this global danger. Here, I must pause to bring your attention to a grave problem that resulted from the partial occupation of my country. A problem everybody should worry about, even those who overlook and don't care too much about violation of international law, forgot 500,000 internal displaced persons and refugees, even for those who dismiss repeated assaults on basic human rights, civil liberties and the environment. I am speaking of the lawlessness bred by the Russian occupation over 2 occupied regions, exists where it's a black hole of governance. Today in these lands, criminals act with impunity. The most elemental human rights are abused. Drugs and weapons are smuggled. People are trafficked. And potential weapons of mass destruction are moved in and out of these territories, posing a threat to us all. 3 days ago, in this very place to discuss the Millennium Development Goals and our progress in meeting them. Over the past decade, I won't tire with a recitation of our efforts to achieve the MDGs, the strides we have made in halving our poverty, in decreasing by 2/3 our extreme poverty, reforming our education system, and improving health care. But I will tell you that all these successes remain bittersweet for me because they cannot be savored by all peoples of Georgia, not by those who live in fear for their basic rights in the occupied territories, not fully by these 500,000 IDPs and refugees who were expelled from their houses and cannot go back and regain their property. Ladies and gentlemen, for the last 2 years, the Russian Federation has been violating the ceasefire agreement brokered in August 2008 by my good friend, French President Nicolas Sarkozy, who was acting at that time on behalf of the European Union. The Russian army has not withdrawn as required by the ceasefire. European Union monitors cannot enter Russian-occupied areas of Georgia, where a constant military build-up is taking place. Hundreds of thousands of IDPs, victims of the ethnic cleansing campaign led by the Russian forces, are still prevented from entering their homes. I know how did Georgia respond to these violations of international law and human rights. We answered with patience and calm. We implemented fully ceasefire agreement and went beyond our obligations, without even using a protest because Russia refused to comply. Last month, the head of the European Union monitoring mission in Georgia, Ambassador Haber, publicly praised Georgian policy as constructive unilateralism. What does constructive unilateralism mean? It refers, for instance, to our calm when FSB-supported militias killed our policemen at the occupation line, or to our willingness to free criminals working for the occupation regime when the other side was kidnapping teenagers who wanted to visit their empty house just after their school time. Constructive unilateralism means that we behave in a civilized and patient way, even when our enemy uses barbaric methods or implements impulsive and irrational policy. It means that even if peace requires both sides to come to the table of negotiations, you can pave the way to peace on your own as well without the other side cooperating. This constructive unilateralism is based on the idea that peace is the supreme interest of Georgia, that peace is the only path to the occupation of our country. Inform the substance of the strategy of occupied territories that any government has put in motion to engage the population held hostage by the Russian occupiers on the other side of the new Iron Curtain that illegally divides our country. Like Berlin Wall, the wall that dividing Georgia will not be brought down by bombs, but by the commitment of citizens to build a free, united country, and by the commitment of the world community to enforce international law and the principles of the UN Charter. This commitment is expressed in the refusal of nearly the entire world to legitimize the Russian occupation and the results of ethnic cleansing, by not recognizing the so-called independence of Abkhazia and Skhin Valley region, and de facto annexation of Georgian territories by the Russian Federation. It is noticeable that despite enormous pressure and multiple threats from Moscow, not a single former Soviet republic has recognized the dismemberment of Georgia. It shows, to the great surprise of those who describe the fall Soviet Empire as the world catastrophe of the 20th century, that the old times are definitely over. It shows that the change I evoked earlier already has taken route. It shows that all the former Soviet captive nations of the Soviet times, they are now independent states that can determine their own policies. It is noticeable, and it is noticed in Moscow. Ladies and gentlemen, I solemnly call today on those free, isolated UN member states that recognize Russia's de facto annexation of our territories and legitimize the Russian-led ethnic cleansing of around 500,000 citizens of all ethnic origin. It is never too late to reverse a bad policy. The dismemberment of my country has failed categorically, and even the Russian Federation will one day need to reverse its disastrous policy. Imagine how uncomfortable those leaders from faraway countries will be when Moscow itself chooses to comply with international law and withdraw its troops. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that day will come. Those who claimed a military victory in 2008 now face a diplomatic and political defeat, and in Moscow the occupation and annexation will soon be debated. They are in fact already debated in the corridors of Kremlin. Because of this situation, it's not sustainable, even for the Russian leadership. We have now in our country Russian soldiers deserting their units and fleeing to the Georgian side through the wall erected by their superiors, just like Soviet soldiers did in Berlin during the Cold War. In which direction is history moving? Certainly not in the direction of those who can deploy thousands of tanks in a very short time, who cannot even take care of their soldiers or prevent them from fleeing. Ladies and gentlemen, those who refuse to modernize their society and to open their political system might have an interest in war and instability. But in Georgia, we know, and we have always known, that peace is our interest, the very precondition of our survival and success. Ladies and gentlemen, I have 3 calls to make today. My first call is addressed to my fellow citizens, ethnic Abkhaz and Ossetians who live behind the new Iron Curtain that divides our common nation. I want to tell them once again, we will protect your rights, your culture, your history. We will work with you. We will work for you. You are part of a common history, a common culture, a common future, and your differences enrich our proud national tapestry. Rather than succumb to annexation by the emerging Russian Empire, we invite you to build together with us a multicultural, multi-ethnic society that would be a regional model for tolerance and respect. I dream about the day when an Abkhaz or an Ossetian citizen of Georgia, as it happened several times in our common history, will become president and leader of democratic and European Georgia. And this dream will become possible in the meantime, in a reunited and free Georgia. And Georgia would have positive relations and even increased cooperation with the Russian Federation. A Russian Federation acting as a rational international player and not as a revisionist or revanchist power. A Russian Federation that will have chosen cooperation instead of confrontation. Rather, this kind of course, that we would drop the politics of embargoes, intolerance, and instead of crackdowns would be a good partner to cooperate with. My second call is therefore to the Russian leadership. You face a choice. Either you take a major part in this ongoing transformation of our common region, accepting that other countries are your partners and not vassals, or this transformation will happen without you. We all want. I personally want Russia as a great partner, not as an enemy. This is why the Georgian government supports the reset policy of the United States and the European Union's engagement with Russia. Nobody has a greater stake than us in seeing Russia turn into a country that truly operates within the concert of nations, respects international law, and this is often crucial, upholds basic human rights. I want to tell the Russian people that they will always be welcome in Georgia, as tourists, as students, as businessmen, as journalists, or simply as friends, and never as occupation forces. And I want to tell the Russian leaders that they should care more about the citizens, their citizens, less about our diplomatic orientation, more about developing the Northern Caucasus, a region that is exploding as I speak, than about undermining our development. They are welcome to come two if they want, in order to understand how a post-Soviet society can turn into a European one. I invite them to come with notebooks rather than with missiles, with iPads rather than Kalashnikovs. I was pleased to notice that some of our reforms inspired a few recent presidential speeches in Moscow. Instead of fighting each other, we should excel together in modernizing our common region. And instead of society occupied of envying our reforms, they should cooperate with us in building a stable and free region, stable and free countries. Because by looking over the school's best pupil's shoulder, one might not get the full picture of what modernization means. And allow me to say that the complete picture is rather simple. You cannot achieve lasting stability and prosperity without respecting some basic principle. Modernization without freedom is not sustainable. And you cannot hope to develop your economy when you send your most talented and successful businessmen to the gulag, like Mikheil Khodorkovsky. Computers are not enough if you do not have free minds to use them. So let us free our minds from our common social past in order to build a common future. And my third and final call goes to all of you, to the international community. Help us secure peace in Georgia, but also in our broader region. We Georgians have learned tragically how a so-called frozen conflict can very quickly become a hot one. If there is a clear support from the international community, I am convinced that a lasting peace can be secured in the Caucasus. I am convinced that if the world shows the same commitment to a peaceful resolution of conflicts in my region than in other parts of the world, we can accomplish wonders. It is in everybody's interest to see this strategic region, to have this crossroad of civilizations become more stable, prosperous, and open. Ladies and gentlemen, the life story has taught us that wars can erupt quickly, but also that brave leaders can secure peace where nobody ever believed that conflicts could be resolved. Life story has taught us that regions that were once torn apart by armed conflicts and contaminated by hatred, starting with Europe, can achieve lasting peace through cooperation, interdependence, and unity. History has taught us that dreams are often more realistic than resignation. I strongly believe that a common market, shared interests, and political and economic interdependence will one day give birth to a united Caucasus. That is what I'm calling for today. We share a similar history of oppression, but we have also in common a deep, essential, and undedicated aspiration for freedom. Undefeated aspiration for freedom. Let us capitalize on this aspiration. Our region will never be truly free if it's not united. It will, of course, require a long and difficult series of efforts and gestures from all of us, but the objective is worth every sacrifice. As it happened a long time ago with the European Union, this amazing geopolitical revolution we aspire to join one day, the historical move towards. Caucasian unity will start with concrete projects in the energy sector, in the education, in the cultural fields, in the civil society spheres. We should begin with more people-to-people exchanges. It is time we get to know each other and forge the links that will bring us together without changing existing interstate borders. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, my birth town and our capital, Tbilisi, is inhabited by Caucasians from every religion and from every ethnicity. Altogether, these people form a living example of tolerance and cooperation. So it's possible. We leaders have to learn from this cohabitation of peoples and translate it into geopolitics. Our unity would not be directed against anyone, and once again, we will not aspire to change any borders. This needs to be underlined. But we might belong to different states and different ethnic groups, different side of the mountains. But it is, in terms of human and cultural space, there is no North and South Caucasus. There is only one Caucasus that belongs to world civilization and that belongs to Europe. And we will one day join in that big European family of free nations, following the Georgian path. We, the Caucasians, driven by legitimate or imaginary threat of assimilation or attacks from other powers or from each other, hope too often to be protected by neighboring empires. This anxious search for foreign shelter has led us to subjugation, assimilation, annexation, and historical tragedies. It has authorized foreign leaders to artificially emphasize and manipulate our divisions. We Caucasian peoples, we all made the same mistakes through history. It is time to change. It is time to stick together, to help each other to survive and progress. It is time to understand that our region has sufficient resources and potential for all of us. It is time to rely on ourselves, on the human potential of our citizens, on development of our education system, and to organize our own development. The Caucasus is one of the birthplaces of world civilization. It is time to show that the energy of our ancestors does not belong only to an iconic past, and that we have something to give to our children and to the world. It is time to stop fighting and weakening each other and to realize that our strength consists in unity. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for unity and peace. It is time to stop being prisoners of the past and to move towards our common future. In the past, Georgian citizens were perceiving our border with the Ottoman Empire as an absolute threat. Today, we have passport-free customs. We can enter each other even without passports, without visas. We have joint airport, free trade with Turkey, and very friendly relations. Tomorrow, the citizens of Armenia, Azerbaijan will be able to cross our borders without passport. Even today, it's a very, very simplified procedure. They don't even have to leave their cars. Recently, a foreign diplomat told me that after crossing our only legitimate legal crossing point with Russia, he encountered dozens of roadblocks where, with dangerously looking, unshaved local militiamen and FSB agents, kept blocking the passage from our valley, one valley to another, from one village to another, aggressively preventing individuals from circulating in their own country. And they were also talking about the eventuality of preparation of new war with Georgia. It is time to replace these people and barbed wires and roadblocks by open borders and passport-free customs. To replace IDP camps by joint schools and universities. To replace Kalashnikov by computers and missiles by books or television sets. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2008, thousands and thousands of tanks, armored vehicles, artillery platforms, troops, and militias crossed the Caucasian mountains, bringing destruction, death, hatred. Now it's time for ideas. These ideas of freedom and unity that we all cherish to cross the same mountains, bringing hope, life, and even love. As I speak, thousands of those tanks, armored vehicles, missile platforms are entrenched or moving around all across the Caucasus. If we remain on our own, isolated from each other, they surely will prevail. But if everybody holds their hands, the hands of the neighbor, if tens of millions of unarmed people peacefully stand together, shoulder to shoulder, being continuation of each other, just like the Caucasian mountains are, then no brutal force will ever break through this chain of awakened human spirit and this irresistible thirst for freedom. Thank you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of Georgia for the statement just made.